A study of how a word came to be is called etymology. This can be described as a mapping of the slow organic process by which words cross language barriers and acquire new meanings. This is generally a very academic field with questionable relevance to everyday life, but some words come with stories that are much too fascinating to ignore. One such word is government. This word makes us think of parliaments, senates, elections, public officials. But it originally had a much more practical meaning. In Latin, the word guberno means to control or steer, as one might steer a ship. And mentis means the mind. So to the people who created it, the word government quite literally meant mind control. Liberal. I know what you're thinking, but the word liberal originally had nothing to do with tax and spend, gun control, or big government. In fact, it had nothing to do with any political philosophy or ideology. To the ancient Romans who invented the word, liberal quite simply meant not a slave, a free man. And the free man had one right above all others. It was the right to engage in crafts and professions that trained his mind. Hence the origin of the 7 liberal arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric that comprised the trivium, and arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy that comprised the quadrivium. It is interesting to note that in ancient Rome, the slaves could still get wealthy, but education was kept out of their reach. Trivial. The dictionary definition of this word is something of very little importance or value, insignificant, as in don't bother me with trivial matters, something commonplace or ordinary. And yet the word derives its meaning from something of great importance, the trivium. As mentioned earlier, trivium is comprised of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and in itself is a systematic method for deriving certainty with any information coming through the 5 senses. The trivium was extensively used by the ancient Greek philosophers, whose work remained unsurpassed for more than 2 millennia. Occult. To most people, this is a scary word, with a lot of evil connotations. It conjures up images of sacrifice or satanic rituals. And yet, its original meaning was a lot more innocent. You see, in Latin, the word occulto simply means hidden or concealed. And for over a millennium, that was the only meaning that this word held. And yet, in the late 1500s, the word became associated with magic, alchemy, and Kabbalism. One might argue that in recent times, the word itself has become an instrument of keeping the public away from the philosophy and spiritual beliefs of our historical ruling classes. Religion. Religion is something we're all familiar with, and yet its origins are a surprise. They actually have nothing to do with spirituality or any kind of enlightenment. The word religion comes from Latin, the verb religare, which means to tie back or to tie tight. Yes, the liberal or free men of ancient Rome that invented most of our language seem to think that organized religion held people back in some way, and I tend to agree. Staying in the religious area comes the word apocalypse. Despite what you might think, the word apocalypse has very little to do with catastrophes, natural disasters, or end-of-the-world scenarios. Even in biblical terms, apocalypse simply means revelation of the divine purpose. But its origin is from ancient Greek, Apocalypsis. It quite literally means to lift the cover, or to lift the veil. So now we know apocalypse is not to be feared. It might be something to look forward to. Maybe something we can ourselves bring about through a deeper understanding of this world we live in. Respect. The present dictionary definition is esteem or a sense of worth or excellence of a person, a personal quality or ability. It's just one of those overall overwhelmingly good terms. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody craves respect. Respect is good. But where does it come from? Well, it originates from Latin. The prefix re implies repetitive action, and specto means to observe or consider. Hence the word respect meant to re-examine or reconsider. So, if there is a message in this, it is that it is right and respectful to question everything, including authority and our own belief systems. Mortgage. Yes, that epic bank loan that most of us undertake at some point in our lives so we can kind of sort of own a piece of land. This word comes from French. Mort, which means dead, and gage, which means pledge. So yes, in French, mortgage quite literally means death pledge. And so in France and French-speaking Canada, they needed to invent a new word because mortgage was somewhat too sinister. And now this epic bank loan is called hypothèque. Conspiracy, also affectionately known as the C word. The dictionary definition of conspiracy is an evil, unlawful, or treacherous plan formulated in secret by two or more persons. Yet its origins are not so sinister. It comes from Latin, con, together. Spiro, or spirare, means to breathe. So the word conspiracy was born from an image of a number of people discussing something who are huddled so closely together that they're breathing the same air. The word conspiracy has an even more controversial variant. Conspiracy theory. Google Dictionary defines it as a belief that some covert but influential organization is responsible for an unexplained event. You see, when an unexplained event takes place, a hypothesis that includes terrorists, lone gunmen, or technical failures is called preliminary intelligence. On the other hand, if a hypothesis includes powerful people or agencies with great means, this hypothesis is labeled a conspiracy theory. And our final word is obfuscation. It means to confuse, bewilder, or stupefy. And it originally comes from Latin, obfuscare, to make dark or darken. And in a symbolic way, obfuscation of words sums up to what has happened to us. Somewhere along the way, freedom got taken away from libraries and wise men, only to be given to stock markets and invading armies. Somehow, the best-known method of deriving certainty became trivial, unimportant. Somehow, investigating the belief systems of people that rule us became an evil thing to do. And the notion that powerful men might get together and have a plan has now been labeled as a paranoid theory. All this was not an accident. And what you do about it is up to each one of you. Just remember, the biggest obstacle between us and freedom isn't government, armies, or evil men. No. All their power is derived from our ignorance. And this is something that we have the power to change.